Welcome to the Introduction to Project Management presentation. This will introduce the concepts and also any tools that are used in project management, and it's particularly for the VCE Applied Computing Unit 1. So let's look at some concepts. The project management monitors the following: all the individual tasks associated with the project, the timeline for each task and when it should be completed, what resources, and that includes people, equipment and funding, are required to successfully complete the project. And we'll talk a little more about the importance of managing resources in projects a bit later on. Also, what are the milestones? Milestones, as we'll see later, are points where a significant part of the project should have been completed, and it's a time where the project manager can evaluate the progress of the actual project rather. What is the best scheduling of project tasks? So in other words, how long will each task take? What tasks need some previous tasks to be completed before they can be begun? And we'll talk a little bit more about that and things called predecessors. What tasks can happen concurrently, in other words, at the same time? And the value of this is that if you can get several tasks occurring at the same time, it means that you can possibly shorten the duration of the whole project. Who's responsible for each task and what resources do they need? And then what contingency plans are there when tasks blow out in time? So how can following tasks, in other words, if a task is blown out, how can those tasks that are after it be completed more quickly so that a project might still be completed on time? And that could be done by perhaps increasing resources. And again, that includes people, equipment, and some more money thrown at it. Are there any other tasks that can be completed at the same time? So therefore, if one task is taking too long, is there anything else we can do in the meantime to get the project back on track? And does the end date of the project need to be modified? I guess when everything else fails, do we have to say, well, I'm sorry, we're not going to finish the project in the expected time, so we actually have to change the date by which we're going to complete this project? When to prepare for project management, the following things need to be determined. What are the individual tasks that will allow the project to be completed? And to do this, what a project manager or management group need to do is look at the project and basically chop it up into bite-sized tasks or relatively small tasks when you just comparing it with the project, and then working out the schedule of those, but in particular in a top-down style. So in other words, you start at the big picture and then break it slowly down into bits and pieces, a bit like you might do with certain assignments that are large assignments. So you do a bit at a time, and that is effectively breaking it down into the simpler tasks. You also would want to allocate a predicted timeline. You have an idea of how long a task will take, so therefore allocate that time to the task. And then, as we've said before, work out which tasks can be accomplished concurrently, what can happen at the same time, which will mean you're probably going to speed up your project if you can do that. And what is the sequence of tasks? So which task comes first, which is second, and so on. And are there tasks that are reliant on previous tasks being completed before they can start? And in fact, if that's the case, the current task that's waiting to start, the tasks that before it that need to be completed are called predecessors. And the current task is dependent on the predecessors being complete before it can begin. Once this has been done, a dependency table can be constructed. Now, a dependency table will contain the following columns: a task number, which effectively just tells you what number the task is in the list. No two tasks can have the same number. The name of the task, the time that's completed or that each task will take to be completed, predecessors, what tasks need to be finished before this current task can begin, the start dates for each task, and that will be worked out, particularly if you set it up in what's called a Gantt chart. It automatically will set either a default of a start date, as in today, or you can specify a start date and it will work out the project on that. The other option is you can actually specify an end date. And what that will do then is effectively work backwards and tell you if you want to finish this project by X date, then working back on the project and the plan that you've done, you will need to start the project at this other date to get it finished by the end date. A dependency table. Okay, so let's look at a project of building a house, and it requires the following tasks, and we're going to put in time frames and dependencies. Just to note that this is not industry standard. It is a made-up project, but just to demonstrate how a dependency table and a list of projects are put in place. So the first thing that needs to happen is excavation of the location. They do the cut, particularly if it's on a hill, they have to sort of cut into it and get a flat piece of ground where a house can be built. We've put a time on 7 days. Again, it's a bit of a guess. It may take less, it may take more, depending on the site. But either way, we've set it as 7 days. Then the next thing is laying the concrete slab, which is the first part of the house, 14 days, and obviously that can't occur until the excavation is complete. Then, after the slab is laid, there's the framing of the house and the roof. That's where the often timber, sometimes metal, frame goes up, and you see the skeleton, I guess, of a house starting to appear. To start that, we need to have a concrete slab, otherwise you're not going to be able to put any framing up. Once the framing is done, the roofing iron can be installed, assuming it's going to be have iron roof. And again, I guess 21 days, and that needs to occur once the framing is complete. Brickwork on the outside, framing needs to be complete to allow the brickwork to go up. Electrical work, well, once the framing is done, the electrician can start putting cabling through, and the same with plumbing. Once that's through, plumbing can start putting any pipes that needs to be put through, and both water and or gas if that's required for the house. Installing the plaster on walls and ceiling and insulation. Now it's requiring roofing iron and brickwork, and also electrical and plumbing work needs to be complete as well. So all of those things, or if you like, all of those ducks need to be in the row before that occurs. The next thing is installing doors and windows, 28 days, and that is after the plaster is complete. Installing cabinetry in kitchen and bathroom, that's going to, they said it's going to might take 35 days, and it can happen after doors and windows are put in place. Then appliances are installed, things like the stove, ceiling fans, fire smoke alarms, those sort of fixed appliances. Following the appliances, painting of the plaster comes in, so the whole house is painted inside. Once that's done, finishing off, so things like skirting boards, architraves around the doors, and general finishing bits and pieces, fittings in the bathroom, tiling, that sort of stuff. And then once that's completed, it can be handed over to the clients and new homeowners can move in. Now you can see there that I've put dependent tasks. So for instance, handover to clients, that needs to be after the finishing off is completed. So you get a cascade of tasks, if you like. Now, this is all very good, but the only other thing that is missing here is the milestones. And these are the significant completion points along the way in a project. And as we said, a milestone is a significant part of the project being complete. And it's basically a check that that's complete. Okay, so let's look at a dependency table. We've got a list of tasks. We've got how long they'll take. We've got the predecessors, in other words, any dependencies on tasks. And it should look like this. And just a reminder that this is not a building industry standard. It is just a pretend project. So here's our table. Now from the previous slide, you will remember that we had all of these tasks, and we can see in the task name column all of the tasks of the project. In the next column, we can see how long each task is going to take. And then finally, in the last column, it tells you what task each one's dependent on. So a concrete slab is dependent on task 1, which is the excavation. Brickwork cladding is dependent on class 3, which is a predecessor, task 3 rather, which is the framing. Same as electrical work, same as plumbing work. And then plaster is dependent on a number of tasks being finished before it can begin. And so on goes on. Finally, the last task, handover, is dependent on finishing off being complete. Now that's the dependency table, except there's no milestones. In other words, there's no significant points at which we can check that a significant part of this project has been completed. So let's have a look at a dependency table that has milestones added. So here we go, we're adding our milestones, and now you can see I've put them in bold, the various milestones along the way. So the foundation milestone would be, have we finished the excavation and is the concrete slab poured and completed? Yes, maybe. If it is, great, we've met that milestone. If it isn't, then we work out, well, hang on a minute, now we're behind time. How are we going to then maybe alter the project? Or, for instance, in framing, you might bring a few more carpenters in to do the framing. So it doesn't take 28 days. Maybe it takes 21 days or 25. But what you're doing is trying to reduce the duration then of the rest of the tasks so that your project finishes on time. Now, as I said, worst case scenario is the project blows out. And you'll find that because this is dependent on the slab, this can't start until the slab is finished. If the slab runs over time, then the framing will be late as well, and so will everything else. Now, when we've done this, the next step is to put it into a graphical form, and that can be done with a Gantt chart. And what we effectively do is transfer the data that's on this dependency chart into a Gantt chart. So the first thing we'll do is actually put the task name and how long each task will take into our Gantt chart. And let's have a look at what we're getting here. And here's our Gantt chart. And you can see the tasks all in the name column. Now it's got a begin and an end date. And the reason it has that is because we've put the time it takes for each task to be completed. And the length of each blue bar indicates the duration of the task. The settings of predecessors, in other words, what task does each task, sorry, I'll start that again. With a task, does it rely on any previous tasks to be complete? And notice also that milestones are represented by a diamond, and this is a standard for these sort of Gantt charts. Now, this time, we're going to put predecessors. Now, in that dependency table we had a couple of slides ago, we had those predecessors set for each one. So now we look at it and we can see then that you can see this cascading of tasks, one after the other, effectively, including milestones to the end of the project. Now, in the middle, you'll see that there's a bunch of tasks, including roofing, iron, brickwork, electrical, and plumbing work. The big deal about this is that all of these tasks can occur at the same time. Now, if you had each task following each other, you would find that that project would blow out a fair bit in time and take a lot longer to complete. But assuming these tasks can occur at the same time, it means that your project becomes more efficient. And it's a good way to work out when you're doing a project, and particularly if there's more than one person involved, can you do any of this, which means it will save time on your project. And as we've just said, the Gantt chart clearly shows that those tasks are occurring at the same time. Now, in creation for a Gantt chart rather, I've suggested you use Gantt Project, which is a free Gantt charting software off the web. I will have a link for it in Simon, and there is also a screencast video to show you how to set up this very Gantt chart using Gantt Project. So thanks for listening to this one, and my details are below if you want to get hold of me, particularly if you want to get some support on the Unit 1 Applied Computing.